Webb, San Jose Mercury News.
You believe in conspiracy theories, Gary?
No, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. Conspiracies, yes. If I believe it, there's nothing theory about it.
Was the government aware that you were smuggling tons of cocaine into the United States?
Yes, the government knew.
This leads to very sensitive national security matters.
National security and crack cocaine, the same sentence. Does that not sound strange to you?
I'm going to tell you the whole truth. I'm going to introduce you to people you should talk to. And then you will be faced with the most important decision of your life.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Deciding whether to share it or not.
One of the DEA's most wanted brought in thousands of kilos of cocaine to the U.S. every day. For them.
For who?
The U.S. government. Or with them. Or at least while they were looking the other way.
Jesus.
L.A., New York, Atlanta. I couldn't sell it fast enough to keep up with supply.
Fancy information you have there. Dangerous.
What you found here, Gary, is a monster.
You have no idea what you're getting into.
You really telling me that I should just walk away from this?
You'd be an idiot not to.
This story scares people.
I'm your big brother.
Well, it should.
Be careful.
There are ongoing operations you're in danger of exposing.
We know you were in Nicaragua.
Am I being followed?
They found a solution. Where you be for the revolution?
I thought my job was to tell the public the truth, the facts, pretty or not. And let the publishing of those facts make a difference in how people look at things, at themselves, and what they stand for.
We'd never threaten your children, Mr. Webb.
What'd you say?
It's over.
I'm not finished with it! Not finished!
This is a true story. Some stories are just too true to tell.
Where you be for the revolution?
Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for coming to hang out with us. I know it was a long journey for some of you, so I really appreciate you making the trip. Jeremy and Michael, you guys have made an extraordinary film. It's an important film. And we could talk about the global implications of getting the story out. But, I mean, the first thing, Michael, is that Gary Webb did an incredible job reporting a very important story. Most journalists never get a chance to report a story this big. And he has kids, and he has a wife. And they saw his name, his good name, completely destroyed, his reputation completely destroyed. And you have kids, I have kids. You can only imagine what it would be like to have the world come down on your head and say, Michael's work is horrible, you shouldn't pay attention. So for you to do this film and put Gary back up on the pedestal he deserves, you have said to his kids and his wife that his good name is restored. And that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, I, making a film like this, you always have to come from the character like that and be able to relate to that journey. So my life is not that dissimilar to Gary's as far as being very passionate about something and dogged. And, that's how I sort of accessed the character. Last night we had a premiere, and Sue Webb was there and her 3 kids, and they feel like he was vindicated, and I think it was real cathartic and closure for them. And Jeremy has been saying, and I've talked about how like that ultimately is the greatest thing that we could achieve with this film. Is the fact that they were moved. I mean, I was hugging them last night. I don't know them that well, other than speaking to Sue with research before the film, getting to know what Gary was really like, and talking to Ian, the son. But the fact that they feel like we got it right, and it's not about deifying their father. It's not, or a journalist. It's more about just being as truthful to who he was, the journey he went through. And as far as Gary was right, we could talk about that as far as, what really happened. The film gets into it, but there's stuff also outside of it.
I think part of the cool thing, too, is the kids get to say, Jeremy Renner played my dad in the movie. And writers are not generally considered tough guys. And I think we think of you as like a great movie tough guy. And he is a tough guy, even though he's not out, brawling with people or robbing people like you've done in other pictures. That's exciting. I mean, like, he is a tough guy of a different sort for you.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I never looked at him like as a tough guy. He's maybe sort of stubborn and pig-headed and made him good at what he does, It's, I think what was interesting about Gary is, or at least my perception of him was, or maybe there's parallels between him and I in that sort of ruthlessness for the truth, It's that sort of that doggedness to I have to find that in human behavior, truth, in characters, and then as he does as a journalist, he has to dig in, and it's not always a pleasant way to go. So if he has to bully to get what he wants, I suppose he is a tough guy.
I mean, the story almost comes to him, right, where folks start saying, hey, I have some really important information that you need to know, and it sounds like a crazy story, and then the woman's like, well, I can actually back it up, right? So that he has to go down that rabbit hole. But when the world starts coming down on him, when the CIA is pulling him into a private room and saying, like, we need to talk about what you've been doing, and you're like, are you following me? And what is the thing that makes Gary keep going in that moment, right? When the world is starting to attack him for what he's done?
Well, I mean, he's got a laser perception. He's got his blinders on to finish the story, to get the truth, to get it out there, and not that he'd ever wanted to put anybody in danger, himself or family or anything else. He's focused on, I'm going to go set the intention to get the truth out. So that's what he's focused on, and there's a fallout that comes along with that, but there's something admirable about doing what he did and doing what people like we need more people like Gary. We need people out that are fearless in what they do for a living, no matter what it is, and it's admirable. And is it admirable because it's uncommon? Perhaps, I think that it should be more common.
Michael, you talk about. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I think also that he came out of school in the early '70s during Watergate, and a lot of these guys that had the highest admissions rate to journalism schools at that time because of Watergate, because of Woodward and Bernstein, and they were seen as like great crusaders of the truth and all that. So I think that had a lot to. Gary was really. He believed in that. He wanted to be that, and. You have to understand him. They say we'll never threaten your children, but like he had like that sense of like, wait a second, this is a big one. Remember the big one? So it was his bliss to be a great journalist. And also the Real Webb was a guy that he just loved to get the bad guys. He was sort of like a cop on the beat, like our poster, with Jeremy with the glasses, the Serpico thing that we sort of present. But he was like that. If you look at pictures of Gary, he's had a biker quality. He was a sort of man of the proletariat, man of the people type of guy, drank whiskey and you see the kind of guy. He's not like these, the reporters actually that we see a lot on TV or hear about. They're all like liberal, or their perception is that. Webb was like, I think no party affiliation too. So it was about going after like a clear sense of good and bad and going after the bad and bringing that to justice. It doesn't matter if they were a non-criminal or a criminal or anything. And that's what Ricky Ross talked about. Right. Ricky said...
The real Rick Ross, y'all.
Ricky, the real Ricky Ross is out of prison, and he was there last night, but I was talking to him, and he talked about, I didn't trust Gary for a while, until like I looked in his eyes and the things he was saying, I realized, no, this guy has a real sense of just going after the truth. And he's not going to care if he's dealing with drug dealers or if I'm a bad guy or a good guy.
Yeah. You talked about Watergate, and you talked about All the President's Men as an antecedent to this film in your mind. But it also reminds me a lot of Traffic, as this is a global drug tale, right? I mean, it starts as a story in California, but also goes down to Central America, and into Washington in the corridors of power. I mean, this is a truly global film.
Yeah, I mean, we focus on the that pipeline. I mean, the reality of it is, and Gary Webb wrote Dark Alliance, which is the full story that was only in 3 parts, which is the articles that were discredited. He eventually was able to put everything in and get everything into a book called Dark Alliance. So if anyone's interested in this story, I would highly recommend. It's a great read. And it's so dense and it's so complicated. I mean, you and I, we could sit here. I mean, I can't even remember it all as far as, you know, where the coke came from and the drugs and sort of how it made its way into the States. But Gary made, in terms of connecting dots, he went from this Meneses to Blendone to Ricky. So he connected that. So as far as the crack explosion, it also happened in other cities, obviously. But he made the connection to South Central.
Jeremy, I'm curious about how this story came into your consciousness, because you grew up in this general, right, Northern California area, right? Did you were aware of the San Jose Mercury News as you're growing up, right? When these stories are coming out. And even before that, we're the same age, right? And I remember before Gary was doing this, right? I lived in Boston, black people saying, the CIA is letting coke come into America. And I'm a teenager. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. The American government wouldn't do that. And they're like, oh, you have so much to learn, kid. And then to find out, like, wow, that's true. Like, they really did that. So talk about when you first started to hear about the Gary Webb stories and this whole CIA Rick Ross story.
Yeah, for me, it was a very, very downstream experience. Growing up 70 miles from San Jose, and not being really aware of Gary Webb or you know, what he'd written about. The downstream aspect I got, remembering in L.A., moving to Los Angeles after living in Modesto when this was happening, and then moved down to Los Angeles in 92, 93, and I auditioned for a PSA for an anti-drug commercial. This is your brain on drugs, with a frying pan with the 2 eggs. This is your brain on drugs. And my audition was like, you know, I think they sat on a box like this, and like, you sit here, you sit there and look, you know, kind of drugged out, and then freak out, just freak out. I'm like, okay. And I freaked out, and I just tore apart the room. Just shredded it. I mean, just tore everything off the wall. Just broke everything in the room, the chair, the thing I was sitting on. Didn't get the audition. I mean, didn't get the job.
That's insane.
I think they probably sent me a bill for breaking all their shit. But that is my only experience of like, oh, wait, the PSA for war on drugs, and okay. It's a very downstream thing. So that's where I got really interested in wanting this story to kind of get out there more, because why did I remember this or know about it? And I grew up around the corner from it. Mind you, I was a bit younger when this story kind of came out, but nonetheless, makes it even more important for even our youth to kind of understand the story.
So, I mean, Jeremy, at this point, you are a big Hollywood star, right? You're a big deal. I'm sure the scripts are piled up in your office. You do pretty much whatever you want. Why do this one?
With this, I was doing Avengers, actually, when this script came to me. Shooting some fake bow and arrow, and realized halfway through that this is a character I wanted to play, because, it's pretty dynamic and complicated and flawed hero, which I love. I love the journey that the character takes. Just creatively, I just like the story. I like Every Man in Extraordinary Circumstances and David and Goliath. These themes are really I'm attracted to. And then further researching it and realizing this is a movie that I wanted to do, it became a movie I had to do. And it represents me as an artist, represents a production company. It represents the kind of movies I want to continue making, not unlike The Hurt Locker and The Town and these things that I was earlier recognized for. Still blessed to do the big movies, and happy to do those, but I don't want to ever abandon the things that the artist in me loves. So this is why Kill the Messenger is very important.
Is he a tragic figure to you?
Yeah, sure. I think so. I think the story is tragic. To me, tragedy is beautiful. You'll never see this face doing a romantic comedy. It's just not going to happen. But a romantic tragedy, perhaps. It's something about tragedy that I really love, and I think that it's something that we can all relate to. I think there's something righteous about it. Something really righteous about this story especially.
Michael, the whole thing seems to me like a blues, right? Like, man is doing the best he can in life, and then life comes and like crushes him. And in a blues oftentimes, right, like you have that thing like, I lost my house.
It sounds like a country song, brother, not a blues. Lost my dog, lost my car, lost my wife.
Right. Lost my wife, right? I lost my house and my dog left, right? Which is the kicker, like, man, like and the part of that is analogous to me is like he has this motorcycle that he loves. Yeah. And then somebody steals the bike, and it's like, how could you do that to a man's bike? And like all the terrible things that happened to him from the media and the CIA, like, but then like, my bike, really, man?
Yeah. No, I'm very proud of that moment because you were able to. It became the thing that cut his legs out. Ultimately, was a personal thing that he needed as his catharsis and his freedom. That's what the bike represented, his ability, one, to sort of, it's his power and his freedom and his own thing. It's the thing that's personal to him outside of the family and also his craft. So to have that taken away for us, crafting the script and designing it in the movie the way it was the ultimate sort of like, taking his legs out. And it did happen. That's actually based in reality in Gary's life. At a very low time for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting talking about this film because it's a true story and you get it very accurately. So, we don't have to say like, well, we won't tell you what happens, at the end of the film because we all know what happens at the end of the film. But you got to see this journey and how these two men move this character from beginning to end, where Gary learns so much and experiences so much in this journey. And I think the thing that he would have never seen coming, because he might have predicted that the Washington Post would attack him, and the LA Times, the rivals in California, would attack him, and maybe, the Ted Koppels would say, well, we didn't get the story, we're going to attack you. But the San Jose Mercury News, his home, right, abandons him while the story's still hot. Why did they abandon him?
I don't think, I'm not sure, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure if, in the true story, if he really knew that, he knew it had a high unbelievability factor, and that's why they used the internet, and to put the sources up online. They were the first ones to do that, so it was sort of cutting edge at the time. It was 96. But I'm not sure he was really aware of the hot reaction to it that broke. There was dead silence for like over a month. In the film, it does it in a cut, but it was, I don't think that he knew it would be that hot from the other papers. So I always see it as the papers and his own all together, that journalism, his bliss, I always say, is that turned on him. That's the most tragic thing. That's the thing that I really found so tragic, the thing you believe in the most and you feel that you're meant to do and we're supposed to do this and have that upended on you. And have it go that way is devastating. If you can call it a cautionary tale or a swan song or more of like, we need, like Jeremy's saying, we need people like this. The film does all of that, swan song and cautionary tale, but also that, and despite what Gary, what he went through, he made a little difference. And here we made a movie and there's more. But he got the CIA to go to South Central to take questions from the black audience. They challenged John Deutsch. Deutsch resigned. They admitted to a lot of what Gary wrote, not everything.
That's an extraordinary moment in American history when the CIA director goes to South Central LA to try to convince them that, we are not flooding the black community with drugs. And the community is like, fuck you, we know what you're doing. We are here on the street watching this
My favorite line is, it's actually pulled from the real town hall meeting, is how can we trust the CIA to investigate themselves? And then one thing, though, that I didn't put in the film because it started to get a little too long because the movies, you have to end your film. But I remember there's a woman at the town hall meeting, you could see it on YouTube, She spoke to Tuskegee, the experiments in Tuskegee, and how it took over 20-something years for anything to come out on that. Yeah. And then Deutsch admitted to that. Like, he's like, yes, those are horrors, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And we've moved past them. It's like, no, we haven't moved past this.
No,
this is happening again. Like, we see mistakes are made, no one is checking it, and our neighborhoods are paying for this. So he got people talking, and that's what reporters are for. They have to be, you know, as far as bringing the CIA to justice, I don't know. Like, unfortunately, Iran-Contra, no, I don't know, because you're never going to be able to do that, really. But Iran-Contra, it was barely reported. It was all about the arms sales, nothing about the Contra cocaine. So it didn't get done in the 80s. So Gary was the first one to sort of, it took an outsider. It took a guy who was like, had nothing to lose. He didn't have the relationships with, you know, Mark Mansfield at the CIA working PR.
I want to take questions from you guys. After one more from Jeremy, I want to get you to just talk on that point, because this film, which is you know, so dramatic, and there's an interesting analog after you guys see this film. See Freeway, the documentary about Rick Ross, which, you know, sort of is a nice sort of analog to this film. And in that film, as in this film, they talk about, you know, like, this specifically was allowed to happen because they knew in the black community, people would not care. People getting killed, people getting addicted, no one would care. And it reminds me of that moment in The Godfather, right, when they're all sitting around the table and deciding what they're going to do with the new drug trade. And the guy says, you know, keep it in the dark communities, let them lose their souls. Because there's no care about those folks. And, you know, you needed a black community to be able to push these drugs into for everybody else to allow this to go on.
Yeah, man, I don't even know if I want to even get into that, brother. This goes into downstream stuff of the themes of the movie, and it's hard to encapsulate that and going down that road. We were very, very considerate, but had to be very conscious about going down and talking about those things. Yeah, we can brush across those, but to really address those things in this movie would be impossible, because we had to tell on Gary's shoulders, the plight of him, and not the ultimate, like, the downstream effects of what he uncovered. There's 3 or 4 or 5 other movies in there about just that, and the ultimate tragedies of that. And I'm talking about you know, what happened in Watts and things like that, where these communities were just destroyed by crack. The crack epidemic happened because crack is cheap, and they, you know, Rick Ross, the guys that cooked it. I mean, so it became one of the most highly addictive drugs. It's kind of what crystal meth is today. You know, crystal meth wipes out people, and it's back then. I mean, outside heroin, it's probably the most addictive and cheap, and that's why it destroyed these communities. Now, we couldn't get into that too much because, again, that is a whole other aspect downstream of what Gary Webb's personal story is, and that's what we had to kind of focus on, because we only have an hour and a half, 2 hours to tell. You know, there's 10 movies within what he's uncovered. You know,
absolutely. Who wants to ask Jeremy or Michael a question? And if y'all don't raise your hands, I'll just call on people. It's cool. And after you see Kill the Messenger, see LIE, Michael's extraordinary independent first film, which will just shake you to the bone, about Brian Cox as a pedophile. I love that film.
Also, my second film with Jeremy in it, 12 and Holding. That's how I met him.
Nice.
He's wonderful in the film. So that one too.
No one has a question. I was just wondering how you think this story sort of relates now with the Snowden issue and leaking these, you know, documents. Do you think there's similarities in that, or are they completely different situations?
I think so.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a similarity. I mean, people, you know, there's the whistleblower, and there's the Gary Webb, the whistleblower. I mean, I don't see, going to Gary's thing, they're not the same. Gary's a journalist. Yeah. His job is journalism.
He's outside the system.
He's outside the system. You know, Snowden was not. He's more of the classic whistleblower. So there is a difference. As far as the Snowden story, for me, you know, I know what he's leaked. You know, to be able to really comment on it and know the full story, I don't, because it's still happening now. You know, I know Oliver Stone is about to make a movie about it. Maybe it's too soon, you know. But there's clearly a similarity. But if you look at what Gary did, it's not so much about national security here. This is, I mean, they claim that. But if you look at what the dots he put together, and you're talking about the black community, you know, the black community needs to know how it's not just their fault. It's like, how did these drugs get here? Why can't we have some oversight and understanding of why this is happening? I mean, there's a door open or there are cracks in the system for this to happen. So
I mean, we're always saying there's no landing strips in the hood.
That's right.
So where is this stuff coming in?
Yeah.
You had a question, ma'am.
Do you think it's harder for journalists to get an important story out for the public attention now with the 24-hour news channels and sensationalized news? Everything's the new Watergate, right? And so, you know, you wonder if an important story like this, if it came out now, would get buried in all of the other nonsense that gets blown out of proportion.
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, with our 24-hour news cycle, it's, you know, we're at war, and then it's, you know, some Kardashian phone leak, you know, whatever. It's you know, sensation. Ah, man, it bothers me so much. Yeah, it's frustrating, isn't it? Yeah. And by the way, ultimately, it's us that control all that, y'all. It's not the media's fault. It's who's clicking on that crap. Well, I bet everybody here is clicking on that, the celebrity leak phone hack crap, instead of, you know, something else that's probably really depressing, but it's an important story. It's easy, right? Yeah. No, but we all click on something that's easy and not something that's interesting and a really good read, sadly.
It's absolutely true.
I think that's more of a comment on our social state than blaming media, because media is just going where, you know, where people click.
Right. No, absolutely. Those of us who are doing the news know we ignore the stories that people want at our peril, right? And if we are saying, well, you need to understand campaign finance reform because the McCutcheon decision just came down from the Supreme Court, and CNN is talking about, you know, Kim and Kanye's wedding.
Right.
And people go over there and like, well, why did our numbers plummet? Because we gave them what we felt we needed to give them rather than what they wanted. So there has to be a balance, and I think there is a balance. Yeah. But part of what you're referencing too is that investigative journalism at smaller newspapers is drying up, you know, like a pond during climate change. It's just completely going away. So I don't think that Gary Webb, if he existed in 2014, would be able to do this, because those sort of budgets and those sort of papers that do that sort of stuff are going away.
He would need to be supported. You would need like a New York Times, a big monster paper, and fearless editors now, today, more than ever, and to be at the Times or the LA, like the big three, you know, a way for them to support that. That would be the only, I would think, with a Ben Bradley, you know, of today, to really be able to push that through. And still, you know, it's funny, I was watching the movie last night again, and, you know, I know the film, and then I forgot the part of the movie where, you know, here they're controversializing this man and they're making it about his personal life. And in the 80s and 90s, and, you know, I'm sure a lot of people read that New York Times piece a couple of weeks ago about Gary Hart, but the whole scandal, the sex scandal idea has become more important and more up to the readers, and more important for investigative journalists are doing that. They're investigating that. Why they should be investigating Webb's story and Watergate type things. And it's interesting because in the movie it happens and you realize, oh my God, that's so relevant, because that's what they're going after, man. They're going after Lewinsky and Donna Rice.
That's an amazing story.
You guys are young, you don't know who they are, but sorry.
Oh, I remember Monica.
Monica, yes.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for coming in and talking to us. Jeremy, you're the lead, obviously, but you're also listed as a producer on this film, and I'm always interested in how those two jobs intersect. The in front of the camera artistic, which is very intimate and personal, and then sort of the behind-the-scenes, more admin and businessy side. And then, Michael, how do you experience having your lead actor also be behind the scenes, driving the movie getting made?
You want to answer?
Well, for him, I was the last person to come to this. Jeremy was already attached as a producer. And I think, for me, the fact that he was a producer on this project, because I know he's a really great artist, and he's gonna want to make the best movie, that was really made me feel safe. That he was like, he could help me with the edit, he could do things like that and support it. And he wasn't just moving on to another movie, it was important to him. So that was huge for me.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was, the lines are very blurred for me, because I'm always very emotionally invested into most jobs that I do. And for this one, I just had a voice, or my voice is actually heard, because I was a producer. But I always give everything I got to make the best I can out of something. And my basic producer job was essentially to acquire and aggregate an amazing team, from our cast and our director, and just get people supporting the vision, and getting a small little village together to push this big rock up the hill, because we all needed to be there on set with a common goal, because no one's there making any money. No one's there for any other reason besides we want to make this movie with these people and work with these people and create that environment and be excited to come to work every day. And I haven't felt that in a very long time, and it's really exciting. So that was my job as a producer. But once it started rolling, and I had so much to do, as in almost every scene, so I just had to focus on getting it right for Gary and his legacy and for his family. And so I just focused on, once cameras started rolling, I was just an actor at that point.
I mean, you definitely did that for Gary and his family. His kids can be proud, and his wife can be proud, and you can be proud of the work you guys did here. It's an important story for a lot of reasons. And it's a great story. It's a great movie. So I encourage all you guys to go see it tonight. First weekend matters. Congratulations, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.